Welcome to HFY Stories. Please subscribe to the channel. Your one click means the world to me. The claw's grip found her wristband speaker first, silencing the alarm feed cut somewhere in the wall 2 cycles ago. Renat counted 3 heartbeats before she moved, not toward the exit, toward the sound. Pilnick's spine ground against the corridor plating with each shove, a wet clicking gasp escaping his throat where Throgast's claw had it pinned. His scales, that sickly olive brown, had gone pale at the edges. 2 more bodies flanked him, a rippling translucent mass on one side, a slab of gravel-skinned muscle on the other. No cameras working here, no witnesses expected. Renat had been 3 corridors away when she heard it, and she hadn't hurried. Hurrying announced fear. She walked into 7 Delta at the same pace she walked everywhere, boots striking the deck in a rhythm that said she already knew how this would end. "You've got about 4 seconds to decide if he's worth losing that arm over," she said. Throgast's compound eyes swiveled toward her, unbothered. 80 pounds of insected muscle on her, armor that turned blades. "This is not your concern, Deathworlder. Walk on, or learn the corridor's rules yourself." "I know the rules." She rolled her shoulders, cracked her knuckles, a sound that landed harder in the quiet than it should have. "Rule 1, let him go." He laughed. It was the last easy thing he'd do that day. The gelatinous one, Vex, though she didn't know the name yet, shifted his mass nervously. The rock-skinned one, silent, watched her hands. Throgast made his move on instinct. The free claw shot for her shoulder, fast enough that any sane creature would have stepped back. Renat stepped in. She caught the strike mid-arc and redirected it past her own ear, using his momentum to fold his arm at an angle his exoskeleton was never built for. He staggered forward. His grip on Pilnick's throat slipped, and Pilnick dropped, scrambling on all fours into the shadow of a support beam, coughing air back into lungs that had nearly forgotten how. Throgast recovered fast, faster than she'd expected, and came back swinging with both claws raised, mandibles wide. Renat didn't retreat. She let the first strike glance off her forearm and drove her elbow into the seam between his thorax and abdomen, hunting for a weak point she'd only guessed was there. Something under the plating gave with a crack that didn't sound like it belonged to any exoskeleton. "There it is," she said, almost gently, like she'd solved a puzzle. The gravel-skinned one rushed her from the side. She let him connect, flesh against stone, a sound like a dropped crate, and watched fine cracks spread across his knuckles while she flexed her stinging fist and grinned through the pain. The jelly-bodied one wrapped himself around her leg, acid already smoking through her uniform. She reached into the mass without flinching, found something that made him shudder and recoil, and peeled him off like wet fabric. Throgast came at her one final time. No more posturing, just weight and fury. She met him blow for blow, forearms, knees, the flat of her forehead cracking into his mandible hard enough to send him reeling into the wall, until the security, klaxon, finally screamed through the corridor, and 6 armed officers arrived to find 3 cadets broken on the deck, and 1 human standing over them, breathing hard, knuckles split open. I saw all of it from the corner where I'd frozen, too slow to help, too stubborn to leave. My name is Orinth, and I have spent every cycle since telling people what happened next, because nobody who wasn't there believes the second half without a witness. Commander Yelix arrived with her crystalline face unreadable and a voice like glaciers grinding underfoot. She took in the wreckage, Throgast's cracked plating, Vex's trembling mass, the rock-skinned cadet cradling a fractured fist, and said one word: "Explain." Throgast straightened first, recovering his composure faster than his cracked shell had any right to allow. He pointed a trembling claw at Renat. "Unprovoked assault, Commander. I was escorting my colleagues when this human attacked without cause." Vex and the other nodded along, rehearsed and smooth. Renat said nothing. She only looked toward the support beam, where Pilnick was still shaking, and her jaw tightened. "That's not true." Pilnick's voice cracked on the second word, thin and raw. "He had his claw on my throat. I couldn't breathe. She's the only reason I'm standing here." He didn't finish. He just cried, quiet, involuntary, the kind that only comes once the danger has actually passed. They didn't put Renard in a cell. They put her in a debriefing room, which felt like the same thing with better lighting. Yelix sat across from her, data pad glowing, and asked the question that actually mattered. You understand there are proper channels for reporting misconduct, mediation, formal complaint. Why did you choose violence? Because I did the math, Renard said. Proper channels take weeks. He had maybe another minute. This academy has protocols for exactly this kind of. Your protocols let that thing choke a kid half his size in a corridor with no working cameras for the third time this cycle, and nobody's filed a single report that led anywhere. She leaned forward, and for the first time her voice lost its flatness. You want to know why I hit him? Because somewhere along the way this whole civilization decided that being polite about violence is the same as stopping it. It isn't. A system that needs a body count before it acts isn't civilized. It's just slow. That is a serious accusation to level at 10,000 years of diplomatic development. It's not an accusation, it's an observation. You measure a society by how it treats the ones who can't defend themselves. Everything else, the paperwork, the mediation boards, the 17-step process, is decoration on top of whether or not someone like Pilnik gets to walk down a hallway without dying for it. Yelix's fingers stopped their tapping on the data pad. Something that might have been uncertainty moved behind her refracting eyes. Your file shows combat experience. Earth infantry. 2 tour. Did you enjoy today? No, Renard held her gaze without blinking. I don't enjoy hurting anything. But I'd do it again in the same second, because that kid deserves to breathe without asking permission from someone bigger than him. If your system can't promise him that, then somebody has to. The silence that followed lasted long enough that I heard my own pulse twice. What came out of it surprised almost nobody who'd stood in that corridor, and it took the better part of 2 days to unfold. Yelix pulled the corridor's backup security files, the ones Throgast and his crew had assumed were deleted, and found not one incident but 17, spread across 3 months, each one buried under a different excuse. All 3 cadets were expelled within 48 hours. No appeal offered. Their belongings were packed, and they were walked off the station under guard, like something contagious. The Academy convened an emergency session that argued for 6 straight hours over whether Renard's actions counted as justified defense or criminal assault, and landed, predictably, on both. A formal reprimand for bypassing protocol, and a commendation in the same breath, because no institution likes admitting it was simply wrong the whole time. What mattered more was what came after. Mandatory bystander training, anonymous reports guaranteed a response inside 6 hours instead of a filing cabinet, and a new clause stating that physical intervention against an imminent threat would be judged by proportionality, not filed automatically as assault. Cadets started calling it the Kovac Protocol before the ink had dried. Renard hated the name enough that she stopped eating in the main mess hall for a week just to avoid hearing it said aloud. I found her there anyway, eventually, at a corner table with something on her tray that looked like it had died twice and been reheated out of spite. Her knuckles had healed to thin pink lines. Pilnik sat across from her, working up to something he'd clearly rehearsed. You didn't have to, he said finally. No, she agreed, flexing her hand, testing it, finding it steady. But I didn't come all this way to watch something happen to somebody and just let it. He nodded like that was the whole answer, and maybe it was. Outside the mess hall window, 3 smaller cadets crossed the junction that used to be Corridor 7 Delta, unhurried, laughing at something none of the rest of us could hear, checking behind them for nothing at all.